And now I have the honor of inviting Stephanie Greenish to present to us her philosopher. So Stephanie has been the director of New Acropolis in Boston for over 15 years. Her passion for practical philosophy stems from her love of nature and justice and a deep conviction that the challenges we face today can be solved if we work together and act to be the change that we wish to see in the world. So it's not a surprise that Stephanie chose to present to us today Maya Angelou, and I will pass the mic to Stephanie.
Thank you, Shira, and thank you everyone for being here to help us celebrate Women's Day. As Shira said, I chose Maya Angelou, and sorry, Garrett, as I mentioned, there's a slight change I need to share first. So for those who are familiar with Maya Angelou, you'll know that she was a brilliant and extremely talented individual who had a variety of careers, including being a dancer, singer, composer, director, as well as an acclaimed poet, author, playwright, editor, essayist, and having published over 30 best-selling titles and received hundreds of awards. But for those who may not know her that well, I prepared just a brief outline of some highlights from her life. So are you able to see the screen that I shared?
Yes.
Okay, great. So although we call her Maya Angelou, she was actually born Marguerite Annie Johnson in St. Louis, Missouri, to mother Vivian Baxter and father Bailey Johnson on April 4th, 1928. And when her parents divorced at the age of 3, she and her brother Bailey, at the ages of 3 and 4, were moved to the southern town of Stamps, Arkansas, to live with their grandmother, Annie Henderson. They made the 480-mile train ride alone with simply a tag on their arm saying that they were unaccompanied because neither mother nor father were really able to take care and raise the children at that age. So Grandma Henderson was the only Black store owner in Stamps and the owner of several homes which were rented to white families in town, all of which did nothing to dissuade the hurtful racism and resentment that what she experienced, therefore, as a child in now the South. And later in 1936, when she was 7, Maya and her brother were visiting her mother in St. Louis when actually her mother's boyfriend raped Maya. And the instructions she had received were to not speak about it to anyone. And so Maya only confided in her older brother and subsequently learned that due to telling this, her attacker was actually murdered by her uncles. And she decided from that moment forward that her voice was simply too powerful to speak again. And she started what was 5 years of silence from that age, deciding that she better just not speak except to her brother Bailey, whom she loved so much that there's possibly could not be harm done by speaking to him. Her mutism led her to bring her back to her family in Stamps. Her grandmother showed a great understanding of her mutism and allowed her to kind of take her time to want to speak again. And it is thanks to poetry that she actually gained her voice back, we'll say. And so in 1940, Maya is now 13, and she moved back to be with her mother, who has now moved to San Francisco. So in San Francisco, she will graduate from high school. But a few weeks after graduation, she actually gives birth to her son, Guy. So at 16, she leaves home to take care of her son, and she becomes a single mother. And she takes on the difficult life of trying to provide for herself and her newborn. So she relies on her natural gifts of performance to try to support herself and her child. And so she has natural talent for dancing and singing, And her performance eventually brings her to be invited to tour Europe with the opera production of Porgy and Bess, which she does from 1954 to 1955. And after returning home to California for a while, she eventually gets roped in by friends to become interested in writing in New York to join the Harlem Writers Guild, where she then meets Martin Luther King on one of his visits to the city. And that kind of sparks her activism career. So in 1960, when she encounters the love of her life, an apartheid militant, Make, she decides to follow him and move to Egypt, where she works as an editor for a local paper, after which the relationship doesn't work out so well. So she's brought to move to Ghana, where then she starts to teach at the university and meets Malcolm X. And that becomes two really important people in her life. So she decides to return to New York, America. I don't know if someone has their microphone. No one is able to adjust that, but she decides to move back to help Malcolm X in 1964. But unfortunately, shortly after coming back to the US, Malcolm X is assassinated. And a few years later, Martin Luther King is assassinated. So she takes both of these losses very hard and kind of throws herself into her writing, encouraged by friends to write. And in 1970, her first autobiography of 7 is published, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, of which Mom, Me, and Mom is a more recent autobiography that was published. So you can see the variety of things she's done. In 1972, she becomes the first Black woman to, write a screenplay that is published by an African-American woman. And she is also the first of many great achievements, we'll say. And in 1982, she joins the faculty at Wake Forest University as part of a professor as American Studies. So other things of note are, she won a Grammy for the poem that she wrote for Clinton's inauguration, but she also won 2 other Grammys. So it shows the breadth of her talents, as well as she was awarded in 2000 the Presidential Medal of Arts, and in 2011 she received the Presidential Medal of Freedom, one of our highest honors in the land, from Barack Obama. And in 2014, she passed away in her North Carolina home. So these are only a few of the highlights from her life, and her accomplishments are simply too numerous to cover in tonight's short presentation. But I will ask Gary if he can now share a few slides to help us tell the story of why am I telling you all this about Maya Angelou. So some things that come out from her timeline that you may or may not know, even if you have studied her before. If you can enter in the presentation mode, there we go. So her professional name, we know her by, is Maya Angelou, right? And it's actually a composite of the name her brother gave her, which was Mai, since he stuttered. He couldn't not really easily say Marguerite. And her first husband's surname, because she had 2 before she met that great love who brought her to Egypt and then to discover the world. So Maya Angelou became her professional name, and from the rest is history. She actually had dropped out of high school to become the first Black woman cable car conductor in San Francisco before returning to high school to finish, as we said, right before she became pregnant and became a single mother. So as a struggling single mother at the age of 17, she actually worked as a sex worker and a madam, of which she spoke about openly, wanting young girls and people to know that, sometimes parents say, oh, I would never do that, or I have never done anything bad. But she said, none of us can really necessarily know what we might do or we have to do, and that when we do things, it doesn't make us a bad person. So part of why I'm telling you this is so you can see that, we see the great characters the legacy that she left, but she didn't necessarily come from easy beginnings. And so the virtue that I'm highlighting for Maya Angelou that she spoke about often is courage. And hopefully you'll see how she had the courage to overcome many obstacles and to really bring a great legacy for women, Black women, and all human beings on our planet. So just as a note, she also was the first producer, director of 20th Century Fox as a Black woman. Sorry, Garrett, I think I might not have them all memorized. That's all right. And maybe it's best for you to hear it in her own words. So, Garrett, if you can play the clip.
Maybe the hardest part is if you teach, you have to live your teaching. You can't say, you do not as I do, but do as I say. No. You have to say, I'm doing my best to live what I teach. I have a painting by Phoebe of a group that she calls Sister Suki's Funeral. And all the women, there are about 9 women, and they all look like women in my grandmother's
Did something change?
meeting group. So whenever I'm obliged to do something,
Volume change, Steph.
and I look at that painting, there's an empty
Garrett, you might want to start the video again because something changed
I
in the
can
volume.
almost hear her voice say, now, sister, you know what's right. Just do right. You don't really have to ask anybody. The truth is, right may not be expedient. It may not be profitable, but it will satisfy your soul. It brings you the kind of protection that bodyguards can't give you. Try to be all you can be, to be the best human being you can be. Try to be that in your church, in your temple. Try to be that in your classroom. Do it because it is right to do. I think if your name is mentioned and people say, oh, hell, oh, damn, I think you're doing something wrong. But if your name is mentioned and people say, oh, she's so sweet, he's so nice, oh, I love, oh, God bless her. There you are. So try to live your life in a way that you will not regret years of useless virtue and inertia and timidity. So pick up the battle and make it a better world. Just where you are. Yes, and it can be better, and it must be better, but it is up to us.
So, although she might not have called herself ever a philanthropist or a philosopher, one of the points that was in the list of things to know about her is that she was endowed with over 50 PhDs. So, doctorate of philosophy. So even though she might not have considered herself a philosopher, clearly the world did not agree. And the courage to change things, the courage to be the change, is a constant that we find in philosophers throughout history. And in her own words, she would say that courage is the most important of all the virtues, because without courage, you can't practice any virtue consistently. You can practice any virtue erratically, but nothing consistently. And what we can see in human history is that changing the system is slow. As human beings, we sometimes resist change. But as all the spiritual traditions tell us, we're here. We're here to change ourselves, change the world. And philosophers are always those who look at what is and kind of wonder what could be. Like, how could things be a little bit better? And not only do they see and therefore are curious about how things could be better, they also find a way to create a little time and space out of their life to be the change, to offer up, to serve, let's say, and create that change in the world. So next year, that heroic spirit, her activism and desire for change was recognized by many and led her to be invited to give the inaugural poem by then President Bill Clinton in 1993 on the pulse of morning, of which I invite you to read all of it. But here I have just the last portion. Here, on the pulse of this new day, you may have the grace to look up and out, and in your sister's eyes, and into your brother's face, your country, and say simply, very simply, with hope, good morning. And that good morning, she talks about often, because she says, you know, when you've just met someone, you don't know the news they've received just before they encountered you, or you don't know what's happened to a person that day or that week. You don't know what other people are going through. But all of us can offer a smile. All of us can look the other in the face and say good morning and bring some cheer in the smallest of things. And so to be courageous or to be heroic and to be a philosopher is not about, for me, knowing many, many things or having read all the classics of Plato or Socrates, but it is that desire to see how things could be better and then to offer a little bit of it to the people around us, to the world around us. So next, Garrett. And you know, that's captured in this short quote. If you don't like something, change it. And if you can't change it, change your attitude. And one more, please. So if you're looking for inspiration of like ideas, she has, someone has put together a hit list of her bests. Maybe it's just me that isn't seeing it. But the video, oops, that went a little, is if you search on YouTube, Best Maya Angelou Motivation, 1 hour of pure inspiration, it gives you lots of ways that you can, each one of us, find a way to, which, as she would say, be the rainbow in someone else's cloud, because we all have within us a little bit of hope, a little bit of love, and something altruistic and genuine to share. So thank you all for helping us celebrate Women's Day today.
Thank you so much, Stephanie, for this beautiful and insightful presentation. And even though Maya Angelou is a well-known person, at least here, I think I still learned a few things new about her.